there, my name's Beth and I'm a speech and language therapist working in Barking and Dagenham.
And my name's Ariel and I'm also a speech and language therapist.
Today we're going to be introducing you to speech and language therapy within the social communication additional resource provisions, or as you might know them, ARPS. The aims of today's workshop are firstly to introduce the speech and language therapy service and the role of speech and language therapists like me and Ariel. 2, to develop understanding of how children learn language. And 3, to develop understanding of how we can support our students to manage and express their emotions. It's really important that you watch this video in conjunction with our adult-child interaction video. This video will provide more practical tips for enhancing communication.
So I'm going to give you a brief introduction into our service. So Barking and Dagenham Speech and Language Therapy Service works together with other agencies in health and education. So for example, in health, we might work with school nurses and paediatricians, people like that. So we make notes in sessions and record observations on a central confidential system. So alongside us as speech and language therapists, school staff also have a key role in supporting children's language development. We work closely with schools to support them to help children reach their speech and language therapy targets.
So what is the role of a speech and language therapist? So we are specialists in all sorts of areas, and this includes children's attention, how they interact with adults and other children, their understanding within their communication, their ability to use communication. And also we have a role in supporting children with their anxiety and managing emotions, especially if that's associated to their communication difficulties. What this might look like in practice is updating children's targets annually, so as part of their EHCP review. We might support transitions into and out of the ARP using reports and communication passports. We're also going to be liaising with other professionals and also the children's families. And we're here to support you to use our recommended approaches.
So just an important reminder that speech and language therapists do not cure or fix children. We work with parents and schools to help them support children to develop their language. So we really encourage you to try not to compare children. Children all develop at different rates and all have different strengths and also different areas of need. And just a little note to be mindful about screen time within school. We know that screen time does not promote language development. And while screen time can really support learning, and we know that it's a really useful tool, we know that it's not necessary to support the children's learning. So please just be mindful about the amount of screen time your children are getting within their school day.
Next, we're going to be talking about understanding language development, and we're going to be covering multilingualism, language development, intentional communication, and also what children need in order to communicate.
So first, we're going to have a little think about multilingualism. So many children you will work with come from families who speak more than one language. And we really encourage parents to use their home language when talking to their child. It's really important to remember that using 2 languages at home won't confuse the child. And actually most people in the world speak more than one language, and it's really beneficial for children to speak more than one language. Speaking more than one language, like I said, does not cause speech and language difficulties. It won't confuse the child, and we do actively encourage parents at home to speak their home language if that is what they are most comfortable with. So next we're going to think about how children learn language and their sort of language development. So we like to think of the communication pyramid, and I'm going to explain what that is in each sort of building block. So the first building block is attention and listening, Our child has to be able to concentrate and switch their attention to be able to sort of listen and take things in, learn interaction skills, which lead to learning language. The next building block is play, and especially thinking about our younger children. Children explore the world through play, so having good play skills really allows them to explore what's going on, which helps them to learn more language and exposes them to more language too. Next is sort of social interactions and particularly turn taking. So we kind of need good attention and listening and good play skills to be able to really have those lovely turn taking skills and social skills. And being able to do that, being able to wait for their turn, listen and be interested in the world around them, then ultimately leads them to being able to understand language. So in order to hear something and understand what it means, we need to be able to pay attention to what they're saying, have an interest in it, and actually be able to wait for long enough to listen. And once they've understood something, then they will be able to start using those words. And then finally is their speech sounds. So we sometimes call that pronunciation. Underpinning everything is interactions. So children need lots of opportunities to interact with other people and actually have good interactions modeled to them so that they can develop all of these skills which develop language.
Next, we're going to be talking about intentional communication. And when I'm talking about this, it's really important that we remember that communication isn't just using words. Just because a child is saying words, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're communicating with intent. We do see a lot of children who will echo back language, and that's fantastic. It's not something we want to get rid of, but while it can give us an insight into what the children's thinking and processing right now, it requires quite a lot of adult interpretation. What communication with intent would include is joining those words with gesture like reaching or potentially eye contact, so they're meaningfully sending a message to another person to communicate something. And what we often see is that a child might be able to use a word for one reason, for instance, labelling, such as cow, sheep, horse, but not for another reason. For example, would you like the cow or the horse? The child might have a lot more difficulty than using those words for that reason. And this can show you how complicated actually intentional communication can be. So remember, when we're talking about intentional communication, we want communication itself, and that might be words, it might be signing, it might be pointing to a symbol, it might be reaching, and also an element of gaining the other person's attention. And it's really important that when we're thinking about this form of communication, we acknowledge that we want children to be less reliant on adult prompting.
Next, we're going to think about what children need to communicate. So we think about means, reasons, and opportunities. So means are the ways in which we communicate. Reasons means the sort of motivation, why are they communicating? And then we're also going to think about opportunities. So giving structured chances for children to communicate, but also making sure that we're being responsive to the child when they do communicate with us. So we're going to think about the different means that children use to communicate. So thinking about non-verbal means as well as verbal means. So we might be using things like eye contact, so a child looking at what they want, facial expression, so telling us how they feel with their faces, vocalizing, contextual and situational clues, symbols, body language, drawing, speech, gestures, signs, and photos. So remember that a child does not have to be using words, symbols, or signs to communicate intentionally with you. And that's why it's really important that we are watching our children and really trying to understand what it is that they're telling us with the means that they have.
Next, we're going to be thinking about the reasons why we communicate. And below, I've captured just a few of the reasons why we might communicate. So before we go through them, have a think yourself throughout the day so far, all the reasons that you've communicated with someone. You might have put your arm out to request the bus driver to stop driving and pick you up. You might have told your children not to behave in that way, or asked for a cup of tea from a colleague. There's lots and lots of reasons that we use communication. So as we picked up, requesting, like telling others what you want, making choices, asking for help, and controlling our environment is a really important reason why we communicate. However, another important reason to communicate is rejecting or protesting. For example, escaping from a situation or a demand that someone's put on us. Saying no, one of the most important words. Avoiding something as well that we don't like, so like pushing it away. Another reason we may communicate is for social connection. So that might include meeting our emotional needs, gaining attention from people. Might be just saying hello, goodbye, telling some jokes, sharing our feelings, starting a conversation, generally forming friendships and building relationships to make them stronger. And we also have sharing information. So early forms of this might include naming and labelling, but then it will develop into answering questions, talking about what's happened in the past and what might happen in the future, sharing information that others need, giving directions, and commenting, and just generally noticing the world around us. So thinking about those reasons to communicate, if a child's not communicating with us, then we need to be thinking about why that is. For instance, are they not reaching for a choice because we're actually giving them a choice between two things that they're not interested in or don't want? Would you reach for that choice? Or do they need support to calm down before they're able to use that communication? It's really hard to communicate clearly for all of us if we're feeling anxious or stressed. So we might need to focus on soothing first and then going back to some of those activities. So really think about what each child you work with finds motivating, and it will be different for every child. They might really like a click-clack track, they might like talking about unicorns, might like bubbles, or just simple things like tickles.
So then we're going to think about opportunities. So it's really important that children know that their opinion matters or what they're trying to communicate with us matters. And we really want to maximise when the children communicate. So choices, opinions for absolutely everything. You know, do you want the red one or the yellow one? Oh, shall we walk or skip to the playground? So really thinking about creating those opportunities for children to tell you what they want rather than anticipating the children's needs. And please remember at this point that it's really, really important that the child has their means to communicate when you are giving them opportunities to communicate. So if a child interacts with you or communicates with you using symbols or objects, make sure those symbols and objects are present so that they can clearly tell you what they want. And it's really important that we are being a responsive communication partner. So just looking at this little message feedback loop here, so a person sends a message, whether that is through talking, eye contact, reaching, and then the person they are communicating with gets that message. And it's so important that they then give them feedback so that the child knows that they are heard, that they were understood, that their opinion matters, that their choice matters, and then they can hear that back. So we're just thinking about these sort of scales. So making sure that the child is given equal opportunities to communicate with you as you are communicating with them. And, you know, in you communicating with them can be, you know, modeling language, but also, you know, creating those opportunities to communicate and making sure that there's a really good balance between the two. So little things like if you do make a comment or ask a question, you're just going to leave a gap. You're going to leave a, you know, a 10-second silent gap for that child to really think about what you've said and respond to it.
So next we're going to have a chat about emotional regulation. It's fundamental that when we're talking about emotional regulation, we understand that every single behaviour has a reason behind it. A behaviour might just be fun, you might be calming for a child, it might help them pay attention, like jiggling or fidgeting. It might help them manage and process their feelings. They might be using a behaviour because it's how they know how to communicate right now. It's a means of communicating. Or they might just be showing that they were upset and they lost control of their body. So when we're helping children understand and express their emotions, we can use this anxiety curve. And as you can see, as the child becomes more and more dysregulated or upset, there is an opportunity for us to redirect them. However, once that passes and we get to a kind of 4-5 stage and they're at the peak of their dysregulation, it's too late and we just want to make sure that we're keeping that child safe. Okay, after that, we can give some space and encourage them. So let's think through what we can do in that situation then. So we're identifying that a child is becoming dysregulated, and that means we're attuning to the child and their emotions and how they express that to us. For one child, they might be fidgeting more, or another child might start frowning, another might start pacing. And we're going to pause there and think about our teacher's anxiety curve. It's important during this pause, we take a bit of time to make sure that we are calm, as we don't want to be going into a situation and heightening the anxiety even more. Now, if we're at that redirect, that 2 or 3 on the curve, we're going to go in and label the emotion. Oh, frustrated. You're feeling frustrated. And we're going to offer a calming strategy. So this will be dependent on the child and what helps them soothe. It might be the sensory room, it might be some sensory toys, it might be just a cup of water and a bit of peace and quiet. And finally, we're going to keep a log of these emotions so that next time we remember how we identified that the child was becoming dysregulated and what strategies help them calm down.
As Beth said, we need to track emotions in the long term. So we can use a log such as this one, and this is at the bottom of our communication passports. So we can think of things that help the child calm down, how they show their feelings and what helps to jazz them up. So by this we mean if they are starting to get really upset and stressed, what helps calm them back down, but also if they're feeling a bit sad and tired, what helps get them excited and back up with their energy levels. And I would recommend sort of thinking about this in conjunction between the school and home. And we also want to think about creating a less anxiety-inducing environment. So consider the child's sensory experiences and the child's sensory needs. So is it a child who is quite sensitive to noise? So do we need to make sure we've got some ear defenders? Or are they a child who finds those sensory experiences help them pay attention? So do we need something for them to fidget with? And also about their communication. So respecting the child's independence and providing predictability for children. So, you know, we might think about giving them choices through the day to support independence and using things like visual timetables and Now Next boards to provide predictability. And those two things can really just reduce the stress in the environment for them. We will be talking about this more in our strategies training video.
If you have any questions and you are a parent carer, you can speak to your school SENCO, so Special Educational Needs Coordinator. If you're a teacher or teaching assistant, you can contact the school SENCO or the LINC Speech and Language Therapist. And if you are a SENCO, please do speak to your LINC Speech and Language Therapist. Additionally, we are putting out universal training and it's available to both ARP staff and mainstream school staff and is relevant for both. In the future, we are moving forward to integrate our ARPS and mainstream schools training so that everyone can be trained and upskilled the same, and also for pupils to be integrated at the best time for that child.
So thank you for getting to the end of our video. For some more useful information, you can have a look at the below YouTube videos that cover what autism is, information overload and processing, and also sensory overload. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.